once again, hello and welcome everyone. This is pretty much the home stretch of Leap 2.0. It's been an absolute pleasure for everybody who's been with us so far, and hopefully everybody who's watching us in the recording format later on. But this is sort of the start of the closing keynotes that we're going to be having. There will be two pretty much back to back in two separate rooms before we call it a day today. Um, Starting off is probably one of the favorite people I've collaborated with over the years, many, many times. In fact, he was the first person that I ever collaborated with when I joined Tyke for the very first time back in the days of the pandemic. And since then, the relationship has only grown, and he's been one of the inspirations in the world of API for me and a way for me to learn more about things, which is exactly why he's here today. He's going to be teaching us a little bit more about this and sharing his knowledge and expertise on all things API governance as a survival guide, or the API governance survival guide. So without further ado, take it away, James. I'll see you later.
All right, thanks, Buddha. Thank you, everybody, for attending or catching this in a recording later on. I've got a lot to cover. API governance, as you can imagine. I mean, we've spent several hours with lots of different speakers talking about all the different aspects of API governance, the nuances of it, big picture things, detailed things, lots of different topics to cover. It's a very comprehensive topic. It takes a lot. And I'm going to try to boil some ideas down into about 25 minutes so we can have some time for questions at the end. And hopefully there's something, at least one nugget that you come away with that you can start to implement. But if for some reason we don't get to your question or there's something you want to talk about, just reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, or you can go to my website and drop a contact form and request some time. I would be more than happy to sit down and talk with you and expand on the ideas. So just briefly about me, just so you know kind of where I'm coming from, I'm the founder of Launch Any. We're an API training and consulting firm. It's been around for about 10 years now, focused on the API space. So we were early in trying to help organizations establish, grow, and mature their API programs. I'm also the author of Principles of Web API Design. That's part of the Von Vernon Signature Series with Addison Wesley. This book has really been a work of almost a decade worth of coaching teams on API design and how to take an outside-in approach and deliver business value, not just a great developer experience. All of it comes together into this book. And I'm also one of the primary curators of API Developer Weekly newsletter, where I curate really interesting topics and articles about what's going on in the API space. Based out of Colorado Springs, so I'm currently around 8,800 feet in elevation, or that's about 2,600 meters in elevation. And I'm not too far from Pikes Peak, which has about 4,300 meters at its summit, so or 14,000 feet. So up here in the mountains, bringing you some API governance insights. So first thing I want to talk about is kind of the state of API governance. What I'm seeing with the clients that I've been working with, particularly in the last couple of years, what are some of the trends and what's going on? And this wouldn't be a talk about API governance without the gratuitous definition slide. There's probably been different definitions by different speakers, and I've heard a few already in the sessions I was able to attend. But what I really like to focus on is the framework of policies, processes, and procedures, and also alignment with business goals. So it's not just how we design our APIs, what our naming conventions are, maybe even how we push things out to an API gateway, which is important, but also aligning with the business goals and business architecture. And so there's really three positive impacts I see that sometimes we forget about. First off, API governance helps us to define our values. What do we value in the ecosystems we participate in as a business or a nonprofit organization or a governmental body when we're delivering APIs? What are the impacts that we're expecting to deliver? What are the values that we're going to instill in every API that we deliver? And how are we serving those people in those ecosystems? I've heard time and again today, APIs are about people, API governance is about people, and I want to echo that we need to think about who it is we're serving and how do we have a servant's heart to deliver, have rules and governance infrastructure in place to be able to deliver great APIs to people. It's also a force multiplier. When we think about the API provider team, most often the provider teams are interested in optimizing their delivery, and there's a time and place for that. And the idea of shortening the stack with platform engineering and focuses like that are really, really important. for organizations. But it also has a positive impact on our API consumers, the businesses, or the any kind of organizations using our API, the individual developer that's using it, the product managers that are leveraging it, everybody. It's going to be a force multiplier. So taking those extra steps in defining your API governance and helping teams and directing them that way is going to have a force multiplying effect. So there's a lot more to governance than just policies and procedures. And then third, it creates opportunities for coaching. And this might be something that you're not really thinking about as deeply, perhaps, but the idea that it creates opportunities for coaching and career growth. API governance creates opportunities for us to help people understand deeper about APIs and the dynamics, either within our specific organization or in general about the protocols and the technologies and things behind them and the developer experience that we deliver. But there is something that I've been hearing time and time again. I've been getting a lot of pushback on the term API governance or governance in general. It's the G word, and we don't talk about that here. We use guide rails, we use guidelines, we use other terms, but don't say governance. If you're in a meeting, don't say governance. I've been getting that a little bit more lately. And if this were in the early 2000s with software, service-oriented architecture, SOA, and those kinds of patterns, governance was very heavy. But we're not seeing that as much anymore. But I think there's some holdover from that and maybe from other reasons as well that might be business specific. But one of the survival tips I want to share with you and for you to think about is that optional practices mean inconsistent practices. And it's good to have options or variations in what we deliver, maybe a primary procedure or standard, and then some secondary ones that fit other common situations. But we can have teams get into analysis paralysis very easy. And that means that what we really have to think about is that we need to provide some guidance, but in the terms of governance, what are the standards practices that we want to have in place? So what I want to do is I want to cover 5 different recommendations that will help you achieve a more transformational API program or API platform. I want to talk about some of the insights that I'm seeing from my clients, and then we'll wrap up and do some Q&A. And again, if I don't get to touch heavily on this topic, we'll try to address it in Q&A and reach out to me if we're not able to get time to cover that here. The first thing, and I think is something that we don't normally hear in the governance realm, is aligning with business architecture. That our governance policies and practices really can drive our business effectiveness. And so aligning this effort that we have in our governance with our goals of our business is important. So APIs are the digital front door to your organization. A lot of those APIs might be behind the scenes, an internal door into your organization, into a particular domain area, line of business. And then some of those APIs get externalized. In some organizations, you have a lot of APIs externalized. In other situations, not as many. Maybe there's more internal focused APIs. But really, when we think about our API platform and what we're trying to do with it, we need to combine our IT capabilities and our business capabilities. So our business capabilities are market-centric. They're looking at what the market needs and delivering on services, products, or a combination of those things. So you have different business capabilities that you're trying to deliver to the marketplace. And then you have your IT capabilities, your technology capabilities, shared tech, platform engineering efforts, all the different systems you have, data sources, and everything else that exists. And those all combine into the API platform. So the consumers of our APIs don't really care if we're using Kafka or not, don't really care what kind of database we're using, what our data model looks like, or anything else. They want to be able to interact with our API platform and deliver digitally, either in an automated fashion or in a guided fashion. They want to have one or more experiences that turn those business capabilities into digital capabilities, or platform capabilities is how I refer to it as. And bring all these things together. So when we think about our governance should be driving this. Our governance is not just focused on the left side of this diagram, the IT capabilities, but it's blending all of this together. And so what that really means is looking at your API platform and your efforts and thinking about, how do I really express the business as APIs, as a topology, a taxonomy of the different capabilities that it's going to bring to bear. And from that, the governance should be there to support it. And so the governance aspect of it might be to define this structure. I see a lot of organizations defining like a domain, a taxonomy, and they use that to map to the paths that are on their API gateway and to group things together. One example, I've been working recently in the commercial insurance space since we're mapping out the underwriting area. And this is just a very simple example. You wouldn't be able to read the diagram if I put it on this slide and shared it with you. There's a lot of work there. But if we just focused in on the shopping and quoting, the policy management, the customer account support, and think about those areas, there's different capabilities. And each one of these are going to have at least one API behind the scenes powering them, and perhaps services behind that are decomposing complexity and orchestrating workflows and so on. So when we think about our topology, our business architecture, one of the other things we have to think about, and shout out to Mark Boyd at Platformable, he's really leading the thoughts, the thoughts around digital ecosystems and what does that look like? So what are our digital ecosystems that we need to support? Do we have partners? Do we have customers? We have our internal workforce, our internal developers, our internal workflow automation, everybody in the organization and how they participate and using those APIs through maybe a web app, a mobile app, or some other means. So maybe you just have partners in your workforce. Maybe you have partners, customers, and workforce in your ecosystems you have to think about. Maybe you work in a regulated environment. Maybe you're in the banking industry and you have open banking standards and you need to think about consumer interoperability and data portability along with your partners, your workforce ecosystems, and maybe even service provider ecosystems, MSPs, ISVs, others that you're working with or involved with that need to work with your APIs. So part of our governance needs to really factor those things in. And I'd mentioned the book that I'd written before, the ADDR Collaborative API Design Process helps you to take that approach. That align phase is your North Star, or it points you north. That's where you need to go. What are the digital capabilities you need to deliver? How do I break those into steps? And then how do I go through an API lifecycle to design, deliver, refine that, get feedback, and then grow it over time? So a great resource if you're looking for something to help teams take a more business-centric approach to their API design. But the survival tip in summary here is align your API platform with your business architecture and digital ecosystems, and then bake that into your governance. How do you encourage that? And we're going to talk more about what that might look like as we go. So number two, create multiple engagement models. A lot of times I see API governance teams, they're part of a Center of Excellence, Center for Enablement, so COE, C4E, API Guild, API Office, Office of the CIO. It falls under one of those kind of umbrellas, and there's different ways that you can engage with teams. And so I've helped a lot of organizations map that out. In some cases, what we need to do is think about community engagement with quick turnaround. So that this top area, we're thinking about either Stack Overflow sites, if you've licensed that, or Microsoft Teams or Slack or whatever it is. People can drop in, ask a quick question. Hey, where's this at? Do we have a standard for this? Is there an example of that? And then from the governance perspective, we also have to think about, well, how do we help teams with a little bit more complex questions? So we do office hours. We set up a time, recurring schedules, usually once or twice a week, maybe in multiple time zones to accommodate a global workforce, and offer a time where somebody can chat for 10, 15, 20 minutes, get a question answered, something that can't be resolved over a chat session. And then the investment gets deeper as you go down the stack. So then we might have coaching sessions. Hey, can you give me some feedback? I've got a question. I'm trying to figure out, is there a pattern or practice around this that we might want to consider? And then all the way down to kind of more of what some people might call a white glove treatment, a facilitated series of design sessions. And that helps to guide teams through and navigate through that life cycle, applying the governance processes and standards and practices appropriately, and incorporating things like outside-in design. So engage your teams in multiple ways. Maybe right now you have a small enough team where you only need to have one particular way of doing things. That's great. But start thinking about, okay, what happens if a team comes to me and they need more time? How are we going to engage with them? Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, I run a COE and it's just me, or it's me and maybe two, three other people. We're a small team. How do we scale this? That's where we get into the federated API coach program. So there's been talk about federated models of governance. I want to talk a little bit about how you federate the governance and the enablement at the same time. And this is something I've been rolling out for teams for at least 5 years, maybe longer. When organizations that we work with are really large, we have to do something like this. So you might start on the left where it's centralized. Every team or individual developer is asking questions. Can you review my API? Can you tell me why this isn't working? Do we have this? You're trying to answer questions and you're just exhausted at the end of the day because there's a lot going on. It's at that point where you say, okay, it's time to federate this. And so what we have to do is we have to recognize we need a centralized group to make decisions that reflect the entire business and the concerns that are there. And so we usually see a federated model rather than a distributed model where every team kind of can do their own thing. They come up with their own governance rules. It doesn't work. And a product team that I worked with recently had that exact problem. Everybody did authorization differently because everybody had their own distributed governance team. So we're not talking about a distributed where every team makes their own decisions, but we're instead talking about having coaches that represent or act as liaisons between your central governance body, I'm calling it in this diagram an API COE, and the teams in their area. Usually we stand up coaches in different domain areas or lines of business. We want to have some sort of ratio that and it may vary based on the number of APIs that you're producing and the experience level of people in that area. One of my North American bank clients, they have about 10,000 developers, 2,500 Scrum teams. Talking about massive scale. Some of the lines of business are very, very familiar with APIs, and they just need a handful of coaches because the teams are fairly autonomous. They're knowledgeable. They don't need to be trained up on a lot of things. And then there's other areas where they're just not really familiar with a lot of the things that we take for granted. They don't really understand HTTP very well. They don't really think about API design very often. And, maybe they don't produce a lot of APIs, so they don't get a lot of chances to understand how to deliver an API inside of an organization. And so your coaches are there to bring those standards and practices to help guide teams and apply that domain expertise that they have. They're probably familiar with, if you're in banking, like credit card or retail banking for checking and savings accounts, or home loans or car loans or whatever that bank may provide. And they may be familiar with those domain areas, but they don't know exactly how to design an API or whatever the case is. Well, that COE, the group of 1 to 3 to 5 people that's managing all the standards across the entire organization and trying to message that out and evangelize that out, they're not going to be able to scale that effort. They're not going to be able to understand those domain concepts. So your federated API program allows you to tap into people that are passionate about APIs and understand one or more aspects of the domain area, and you get a group of coaches, not just one, but usually a group of them that are available to support the teams. And if you have an on-site or return to office kind of mandate, or there are, a lot of people that you're working with are going back into the office, you can actually hang a sign in the building and above the cubed area where you might have some coaches and draw attention and say, hey, we're here. And we're here to help you and to facilitate that. So they usually are there to help maintain and support the program and processes and assist teams in design questions, facilitate the sessions and office hours, allowing the COE to scale up, and then applying API standards, conventions, all of the different aspects of your API governance model. They're also there to take that feedback from those teams and bring it back to the central group and say, hey, this isn't working, or we're getting a lot of, this doesn't make sense anymore. Can you clarify? We need some better examples in the standards, or we need some better tooling. Can we get you and some of the platform engineering teams together and figure out how to solve this? So you're not by yourself. That is the key thing here. And I'm sure a lot of you that are actually running API programs and are here listening for different things, you may feel like you're alone or in just a small group of you are alone in the midst of a big battle that's just never ending. This is where the coaching program stands out. And your coaches are going to need some training. You're going to expect them to demonstrate skills in some fundamental concepts of design and your standards and your processes and the tooling and everything else. So we oftentimes work with organizations, take our training material, lay it out into a path that allows coaches as well as individual team contributors and everybody else to get up to speed on all these concepts. And so we'll have tiered levels, and you can test out of the fundamentals of, most of your coaches should be pretty familiar with some of these things. They can test out of it and jump into the certified API coach course and be able to go in and learn how to conduct design reviews, facilitate design sessions, how to engage with teams in office hours, make sure they understand all the resources that are available. So federated coaches are huge. They allow you to invest in your organization doing non-scalable work, that one-on-one or one-on-few engagement model in scalable ways, because now we have these representatives that we're training up and supporting and engaging with and allowing them to move across the organization and support teams. Now, number 4, collaborating with other practice areas. You are not alone. I'm going to say that again. There are other areas of your organization that is probably doing the same thing you're doing. Governance is not anything new. And so the way that we look at this is we look at it kind of as a layered approach. At the center is our business strategy, is our business architecture, what's driving, what's motivating things. It's going to be the foundational element of our overall API platform. And then those platform engineering practices, the tools, the automation, the shortening, the stack that we heard about earlier, for those of you that had a chance to listen into that panel discussion on platform engineering and DevOps and how all this fits with APIs. And then you have your governance, your practices, your standards, and that goes for APIs, it goes for events and streams, and your async APIs and so on. And so you have those 2 layers, and then you have your business capability platform. And this is where I love to focus more on, because those are the platform APIs that represent how you do business, your workflows, your vocabulary across all the different domains and lines of business. And that can carry through your APIs and streams. How do they reflect how you do business? How do they reflect as a digital front door to your organization? Then you have your digital ecosystems. What are the different areas that you're engaging with, like we talked about earlier, and what kind of apps are people building or integrating with you via your API integrations. And so you have kind of that internal facing aspect of building out your applications and building on top of that business capability platform comprised of APIs and streams and everything else. And then you have that external facing. So you have all these different ecosystems, and you have to think about those. So if you think about it in terms of ecosystems, it helps you start to think about your governance a little bit clearer. Like, what is this governance policy doing? Is it moving the external side, making things better for them, internal, both? Is it supporting partners? Is it supporting something else? But you're not alone, because there's other people doing this. And so when we look at the business capability platform, it's not just APIs and events and services, it's data, your data sets, your data products that you're offering, your trust frameworks that you have, your security models that you have, your cloud native engineering practices and platform engineering practices. And so you have all of those. You have your emerging AI practices that are out, the AI governance, your policies and procedures, your agentic side, your model side, how you're going to interface. You're going to interface with chat, voice. Is it going to be API driven? What is that? So there are a number of different practices within our organizations, and they're all kind of needing to do the same thing. So work with other people that are involved with that and help drive that. So know that you're not alone. Don't build it in isolation. Collaborate with other practice areas whenever you can and leverage that to drive your governance. Okay, so with just a little bit of remaining time, I want to cover a couple of more things. I'm going to shorten this a little bit, but the slides will be available so you can go in and dig in a little bit deeper. But when you're thinking about your API governance, a lot of times what comes up is how do we determine if a particular standard or policy needs to be implemented? And so we need to think about what pillars are standing up our API platform efforts. Pillars are broad statements that outline your org's core principles, areas of focus, and they help drive successful operations. These should be kind of the foundational elements that help you from here figure out what all your policies and everything else are. So your pillars are your foundations that say, here's what we need to do. The policies are the expectations of what you're asking people to do day to day. And it might be scoped within a specific domain or broadly. And then when we think about looking at this, we really have kind of three areas: strategy enablement, management, and operations. So you can't just have naming standards and call it done. You have to look at the full life cycle. So that's what we do at LaunchGenie. We actually will come in and we have this thing called the API Strategy Compass. It's the idea that our strategy and practices, our design, our full API life cycles, our documentation, everything are evaluated. And we figure out where you're at and where you need to be. And so what we do is we go through and we have about 200 questions and we weigh those out, we score it, we lay it out onto the spider graph, and then we tell you, okay, here's what you're going to need to do to walk, run, and fly with your organization. Here's what it's going to take to kind of keep moving things forward. And so we've broken them into different pillars. There's 8 of them: strategy and business alignment, government and enablement, portfolio and domain ownership, discovery and documentation, design and delivery, onboarding and adoption, security and operations, and runtime management and monitoring. So those are all the aspects that we need to think about. So we're thinking about all 3 of those different areas, and they're built upon our pillars. We have policies, and that's what will define your API governance. So when you think about it, define your API pillars and policies to establish expectations and provide a decision framework. So when delivery teams are trying to figure out, well, what really lines up, or what would align properly with what we're doing, the pillars and those policies are what really drive that. So that's 5 recommendations I have. Think about business architecture, integrate that into your API governance. Absolutely important. Start looking for multiple engagement models, scale that up with coaching, a federated coaching program, collaborate with other practice areas that might be going through the same kinds of governance efforts you are, and see if there's ways that you can leverage what they're doing and collaborate and establish your governance program, and then get API pillars and policies established so that it can guide your teams. So I'm going to stop there, and I know we have just a couple of minutes, maybe see if there's any kind of questions or anything that I can try to address in the time that we have remaining.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, James. That's, as usual, a fantastic session, I think, to sort of kick off our closing ceremonies. Any specific question? I know we only have about a minute, so I don't know if anybody from the chat just wants to post a final question before we head out. Obviously, you have James's details right here so that you can reach out, contact, get to know a little bit more. He's got his own book as well, so lots to learn there. If any final questions, otherwise, I think we'll head on over to the next one because there's not much of a break there. But thank you so much, James. It's been fantastic. All these material will be shared with everyone who's attended today. And again, if you want to reach out directly to James, feel free to do so. If you want to reach out to him through us, we can facilitate that as well. So we're on very friendly terms, thankfully. So that's very good.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Buddha.
Thank you so much, James. And over to the next one, which is going to be about AI governance in action, structuring the AI supply chain for success. Is going to be our CEO, Martin, delivering pretty much the final closing keynote. So appreciate everyone being here. See you in the next one.